This is the Living Vertizontal Podcast, brought to you by The Church at Riverstone, a fellowship of the Church of the Nazarene in Madera, California. We are a podcast that discusses the intersection of Scripture and our lives. Together, we continue the conversation that was started each preceding Sunday morning in our worship gathering.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick.
I'm Natasha.
I'm Brittany.
I'm Derek.
And we are the Living Vertizontal Podcast with you this week as we continue our study of the Gospel of Luke. In our episode last week, as a quick reminder, we moved into Luke chapter 7, looking at verses 1 through 17. And within this passage, we saw two different miracles take place, one involving a centurion and one involving the widow. And together we discussed these two different healing stories and all that Jesus demonstrates about his upside-down kingdom. Following his Sermon on the Plain, we have the opportunity to see Jesus live out these teachings. Living in Jesus' upside-down kingdom, we are invited to love, to see, to care for, to trust others, and to identify all Jesus is doing in our lives and in the lives of those around us. This week, we continue on into Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 23. And in this passage, we see John the Baptist send his disciples to Jesus to ask a pretty important question. We have Natasha reading for us today. So Natasha, could you read Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 23?
Yes. Luke chapter 7, verse 18. Then John's disciples informed him about all these things. So John called two of his disciples and sent them to ask the Lord, "Are you the one who was to come, or should we look for someone else?" When the men came to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to ask, 'Are you the one who was to come, or should we look for someone else?'" At that very hour, Jesus healed many people of their diseases, afflictions, and evil spirits. And he gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the one who does not fall away on account of me."
All right. Thank you for reading that for us today, Natasha. Let's just jump into this conversation. Again, we have kind of a shorter passage. But as we look at this, obviously we're faced immediately with this placement of John's disciples informing him about everything that's happening and all these things. And so, again, as just a quick reminder, we think about what all these things are. It's all these miracles that he is performing, this raising of people from the dead in two different situations via two different avenues. And healing countless people and casting out demons. Like, they're giving him this information, and that sets the stage for the exchange that's going to take place. So with that, what are we seeing? What's standing out to you? What are you thinking as we begin to work through this passage for the day?
I think the first thing that really caught my attention is how there's not necessarily one solid thought on why John sent his disciples to ask Jesus these questions. I found a few. It could have been for their benefit, for them to know that this is truly Jesus, the one that John was preparing the way for, to bring clarity to them about who Jesus is. And another one that I found was about John, and maybe because he's in this prison cell, having doubts arise because he's sitting there probably hearing or obviously hearing about all these things that Jesus is doing. And doubt starts to creep in as he sits there in this cell.
Yeah, and there was a couple more that I had read about. The two that you just named were the ones that I have heard of previously. And so these other two were kind of new to me, but one of them was this idea that John was sending his disciples to ask, to try to figure out what kind of Messiah Jesus was. Not that he was doubting that he was the Messiah, but just in an effort to gather information or to understand, like, all right, Jesus, you're the Messiah. What does that mean? What does that look like? And then the other one was that, being in prison is not easy. It's pretty discouraging. It's pretty hopeless. And I'd imagine by this point in time, John is feeling even more hopeless because things are kind of winding down. And so another thought is that John was in this place of discouragement, and he sent his disciples to ask this question to be encouraged, like to be reassured, to be reminded, like this is not all for naught, because this is who Jesus is.
Okay, this is a lot of theories that we got going here. So can I recap for a second just to make sure that I'm on the same page?
Sure, why not?
So we got the first one that you guys mentioned. So we're going to call this number one, just to keep them straight. So number one, this is a sending to benefit the disciples. So John has his disciples in mind. He's sending them for their benefit so they can see who Jesus is. The second one is John is doubting. And so John really needs confirmation, or he needs knowledge that this is in fact the Messiah. Number three is John's curiosity. So he's wondering, is this what the Messiah looks like? This is different than what we were kind of expecting. Who is this Messiah? What does that mean for us? Because it sure doesn't look like the conquering king that everybody talked about. Yeah. And then the fourth one we discussed was, or that you mentioned, Nick, was to bring John encouragement in the midst of all of his discouraging circumstance.
Right.
So John kind of fishing for encouragement or reaffirmation of what he already knows, to say, yes, this is worth it. You're doing the right thing. Keep on, press on. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So why don't we take a look at each of these and just kind of express our thoughts? And then, I don't know, it might be fun to kind of see where we all end up landing, or if we even agree.
So as we look at the first one, this one stuck out to me the most, because John, of the people that he is discipling, I could understand, considering his circumstance, why he would want to send them, because I'm not the Messiah. I know I'm not the Messiah. This sounds like the activity of the Messiah. And so I want my disciples to see this Jesus in operation, to see him in his element, being who he has been sent to be. And so for me, like that, it resonates with me, because if I know I'm going away, I want to make sure that those who are coming behind me, if I'm responsible for them, I want to make sure that they're following the right thing. They're following Jesus. They're seeing Jesus and seeing what it looks like as he lives out this call that the Father has placed on him. And so for me, it just resonates with me the most. It may not be the right one, and I think there is something to this ambiguity that we see here. But for me, that's the one that resonates the most with me.
I like this one too. I think it's a really good operating theory. I mean, this kind of is how Jesus behaves with his disciples as well. We are going to get to see this, spoiler alert, coming up here in just a couple chapters, next chapter, in Luke, where Jesus is going to send his disciples out to try all these things that they've now been taught, and to observe for themselves, and to go on mission and ministry for themselves, because the experience that they have, they can be taught a ton, but when they gain their own experience, then somehow that's so much more formative. We learn so much better through experience. And so I think this seems like an excellent reason that John would send his disciples to ask this question. John is confident. He is aware of who the Messiah is. He's aware of who Jesus is. And so, why not send these disciples so that they can begin? John's done. He's prepared the way. The Messiah is here. And so now his disciples, who had been trained to prepare the way, can know, look, your mission has been fulfilled, but you are not done. You now have a new mission, and that is to follow Jesus. You are to follow the Messiah and to live into his new kingdom. Now go and be trained by him and for his purposes, for his new kingdom.
Yeah, you've prepared the way. Now it's time to walk in the way or walk with the way. I will echo what you guys have shared. For me, I guess I've always just assumed this is what was meant here, that this is what John's intention was. Like, I've always assumed that in John sending his disciples to Jesus, it had nothing to do with like John's misconceptions or doubts, and everything to do with John recognizing what is to come for him and the importance of, in a way, like passing the baton on and saying, look, you guys have followed me to this point and I can only take you so far. And he is the one who is going to take you all the way. And so I'm going to send you to him. And so you going and asking him this question is less about me getting the answer, but more about you experiencing what that actually means, because you're not ignorant. When you see what he is doing, when you experience that firsthand, you're going to recognize the parallels with the prophets of old, and you are going to understand this is the Messiah that we have been waiting for. And so I think for me, it was just always this assumption that this is what John was doing.
So does that leave us in a place where number 2 is kind of out? We don't really think that John was doubting.
I see, that one just doesn't make sense to me. And here's why. John baptized him. Like, John baptized, and before he baptized him, he made this proclamation to the crowd that, like, one is coming. Like, I am not the one. One is coming whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. And then Jesus comes, and then he's baptized, and then the heavens open up, a voice from heaven, God the Father speaks. Like,
how could you not know?
This just doesn't make sense. Like, for you to doubt in the midst of so much assurance, but then again, at the same time, I feel like often
we forget.
Yeah, I can see us fit those pants perfectly, where we have these
probably
these assurances.
You had a skirt or something, probably, right?
A kilt.
I think circumstances could lead to doubt.
Yeah.
You know, John is in prison. Things are probably not going well. And for somebody who made the way for the Messiah, that could feel really discouraging, that he's out there doing things that John can't witness, that John is not privy to. And I could understand how he possibly could doubt due to circumstance.
All right, that's fair. I'll allow it.
Well, and like, if he hears these stories as his disciples come back, and he talks about this centurion that had his servant healed, and he's got to be thinking, like, wait, a centurion? Huh? Not me? So I could see how the doubt could creep in, but I almost wonder if the doubt wasn't John's doubt. If he could have been sending them with the question because of the doubts that they have as they're witnessing what Jesus is doing. Because, you know, just as much as John could have a frame of reference for what the Messiah looks like, so could they. I mean, they similar circumstances. And so if Jesus isn't meeting my expectations, then I would start to say, you know what, this doesn't sound like the guy that you were talking about, John. This doesn't sound like the same guy. So I could also see
that could allow some doubt to creep in. Yeah.
Yeah. The conversation, we don't know the conversation, how the stories were told to John, and who they were around when they heard these stories. Because, you know, we've seen in the past few chapters that the Pharisees and the Sadducees are starting to get a little like questioning of what's going on. So they could have been close by to some of those conversations and kind of added those into their telling of the story.
Yeah, you know, this week with the kids, I didn't have the intention of going here, but they've been studying this story about John in Matthew, and so they're very, very familiar with the details of it, and so they spent a little bit of time talking about John and how John is in this really difficult situation in prison. We talk about how that can bring on doubt when we're in these difficult situations, and without a doubt, John had probably been praying and asking God, hey, help me to find favor with Herod. I don't want to compromise the truth that you call me to speak into his life, but I have more to offer. I want to be a part of building your kingdom. I want to be preparing the way. I don't want to be stuck in this place. I mean, I will if you need me to, God. But I'd rather if you'd set the captives free. You know, I want to be out of here. And so we talked about how hard that would be to be in John's position where you're in prison, you're locked up, you're not able to do what you feel like God has called you to do, and you're praying for a miracle. And then you have your disciples come and they report, here's God's activity. He's doing miracle after miracle after miracle, but not yours. Miracle after miracle after miracle. And you just sit in this. And what does that feel like to be watching everyone around you get their miracles, but God looks at you and says no? And we talked about how John is in such good company because this is Jesus. Jesus sat in the garden and he prayed, God, is there some other way? God, can you take this cup from me? God, can we do this some other way? Please, 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 God. I don't want to go through this. This sounds horrible, God. I love them. I love them. I know we love them. I want to be obedient, but please, God, reconsider. Please, God. And God looks Jesus in the face and says, no, we love them. And it's this recognition that God is no less there with John. He's no less there with Jesus than, than he is with the people who he's performing the miracles on behalf of. And to recognize that God is with me even when he says no, even when he says wait, even when I'm not getting the prayers answered in the way that I'd hope, or I'm not even hearing God in the way that I would hope, that he's no less there. And you're in good company, and we're in good company, and we can find strength in that.
Yeah, as I think about what you were just sharing, the thought that comes to my mind is the upside down kingdom that Jesus is ushering in or has ushered in is bigger than just one individual's circumstances. And I feel like I heard that loud and clear for myself because so often, like, I think about things in terms of me, or we think about things in terms of me. We can tend to be pretty myopic. We're like, that's how we're raised, right? The world that we live in is very self-focused, and I'm not trying to say that in a hypercritical way. It's just kind of a reality. It's the way of life. And so if that's the way that we're wired and the way that we look at things, it would be very hard, and it is very hard to see and even fathom this kingdom that Jesus is bringing in, because that is not the way of his kingdom. And so for John to be either learning this lesson or reminded of this lesson or reinforcing this lesson with his own life in front of his disciples, whatever it is, of Jesus's upside down kingdom is bigger than just the circumstances of an individual. Like, that's an important lesson for them to learn. And it's really important for us today to learn. Like, we all have our stuff that we're going through, but that stuff can't and shouldn't take center stage, because those circumstances are not bigger than his kingdom. And in the midst of everything that we're going through and everything that we're suffering or everything that we're enduring or everything that we're celebrating, whatever it is, in the midst of every circumstance that we face, good or bad, our focus ought to be like, how is Jesus's kingdom being exemplified here? Not poor me or yay me. It's all got to be a focus on him and his kingdom.
Well, and I think sometimes it's easier for us to have a kingdom mindset when we can see how this is good for the kingdom. You know, Jesus knew how his death was good for the kingdom.
That's true.
John, I don't know
I
don't know if we can say the same about John. I don't know, you know, looking at it now objectively, even seeing the other side of it.
Now, how is it good for the kingdom?
God, why not? Why not let him free?
Yeah.
But I have to trust that God knew something that was necessary, even to save one soul, right? Even to accomplish a small portion of his plan.
Mm-hmm.
That was necessary, and that while this isn't beautiful and this is not what his intended kingdom will be like, this is the best of what it can be right now in this broken world. And God is working all these things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
Yep. And so, you know, that kind of brings us to number 3, the third reason, as potential reason as to why John would be sending his disciples, and that is his curiosity, his just trying to understand who is the Messiah.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Jesus did not look like the Messiah that everybody expected. He did not look like the conquering king who was coming to overthrow the Roman oppression. Right. He did not fit that mold at all. And so this really had to have been kind of alarming to people. I'm sure some people, you get, you know, we look at Paul's conversion often, and I feel like you get where Paul was coming from, where he was like, no, this guy is a heretic. He clearly does not fit what Scripture told us was going to be the Messiah. Mm-hmm. Don't you guys follow the Bible? I mean, or, you know, the Old Testament prophets, the law and the prophets. Aren't you looking at this? Aren't you seeing what we're seeing? Because this guy does not match. And I think that's, you can see very easily how this is a cultural concern. So I think that John sending, you know, to satisfy his own curiosity, or maybe, you know, again, benefiting his disciples a little bit and their curiosity of, well, this Messiah doesn't look exactly the way we were expecting. Are we sure this guy? So, you know, wondering, not doubt so much, but wondering, hey, does this fit? How does this fit?
Well, and I mean, I guess I know we still have the fourth one to address, but when you look forward in the passage at Jesus's response, he kind of responds in a way that would allude to the fact that this was actually the reason why the question was being asked, because Jesus's response is to paint himself in line with the prophecies of Isaiah. And John's disciples are not going to be ignorant of the Old Testament, and John's not going to be ignorant of the Old Testament. Like, let's think back to who his parents were. Like, they're going to understand what the Old Testament has said. They're going to understand what the prophets have prophesied, have promised, and have described about who the Messiah is and what the Messiah is going to accomplish. And so for Jesus to respond in the way that he does, where he says, you know, essentially, come with me and let me show you, rather than just say, you know, yes, I'm the Messiah that you are expecting. Let me show you what it's like. And then the example that he lives is an example that that checks all of those boxes of the Messiah of the Old Testament. Like, he is demonstrating to them that he is this Messiah. And in being this Messiah, now they need to make the room, they need to make the space for their understanding to be broadened, for their preconceived notions to be set aside, so they can actually see Jesus for who he is and not just who they expected him to be.
Yeah, we talked last week about Jesus kind of modeling this Sermon on the Plains, and it's as if here he's modeling what the Messiah looks like, despite maybe what was conceived in their minds previously. He goes beyond that to not only, they don't have to speculate any longer what this Messiah looks like.
Maybe what you just said there, Derek, it kind of leads us into the fourth, because as I was thinking about the association with the Sermon on the Plain and thinking about the Beatitudes, in the last couple of verses of the Beatitudes, he makes a statement of, blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. In other words, because of me. And so it's like in John asking this question and in it modeling the teaching of the Sermon on the Plain, including the Beatitudes, John is receiving encouragement from Jesus with this response, because he's saying, this fits John, right? He is hated by Herod. He is being excluded from life as a result of this hatred. He's being insulted. He's being rejected. And eventually he's going to be being put to death. And yet, according to Jesus in his Sermon on the Plain, blessed are you who are all of these things on account of me. And so John is able to receive this as somewhat of an encouragement.
So you're throwing your hat in the ring for number 4?
No, I'm not. I don't think I have a hat that goes into any specific ring anymore, as we've sat here and worked through all of them like this.
Yeah, I think there's merit probably to each of the different viewpoints. I guess that's probably why they made them their way into being accepted viewpoints.
Yeah, and as I think about our midweek meditations, one of the questions that we actually had to work through for our midweek meditations this week was, why do you think it is that Luke does not explicitly state the purpose of John's question? Is it intentionally ambiguous? What purpose does the ambiguity serve for those of us reading all these years later? And despite the fact that, I confessed earlier on in the show about how it was a foregone conclusion for me that this obviously was, John passing the baton of his disciples to Jesus and saying, now you go follow Jesus, him being a good pointer, like we all should be. This idea that it very well could be any one of these things and potentially every one of these things, I think enables this exchange to be something that speaks very personally to each and every person that comes to this story.
Yeah, it's as if different circumstances in life can cause you to find yourself in any one of these 4 viewpoints.
And there's complete validity to each of them as we sat there and worked through them. I'm not going to lie, as we started the explanation, I figured by the time we got to the end of it,
for sure we'd have a winner.
It'd be pretty obvious which way we were leaning. But as we work through each of those, it's oh my goodness, it really could be each of these, or these are so interconnected and intertwined, and there's so much working together here. It's almost hard to separate what it could possibly be. And you're almost, I guess in a way, we almost rob it of its full meaning if we say it's one over the other.
Yeah.
The moral of the story is knowing who Jesus is can help in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if you're going through doubt or, you need encouragement or you're trying to show people the way. Knowing who he is extremely important.
Which is, I think, ultimately where Jesus lands at the end of our passage for this week when he makes the statement, blessed is the one who does not fall away on account of me. This idea of just how important it is for knowing who I am, right? Not being willing to come to me humbly, to learn from me and to get to know me and to encounter me, rather than coming to me with who you think I ought to be or what you're expecting from me. There is this very intentional call of Jesus to have our focus where it ought to be, on him and only on him. Not on our doubts, not on our ideas, not on our circumstances, not on any of that. It's just supposed to be on him. And then everything kind of flows out from there. And I mean, that's his invitation to us from him. And then our response is one that I feel like the disciples model well, a coming to him humbly with this question. And maybe in a way, I wonder, how humbly do we come to Jesus? How humble are we in our encounters with others? How often do we step into a situation with our own expectations and understandings and assume that that is the truth, when really the invitation is to come humbly and allow him to be the one who shapes?
As you journey with us, we recommend purchasing Midweek Meditations, A Journey Through Luke, Part 2, which is available for purchase on Amazon. Also, be sure to follow the Living Vertizano podcast to stay current on all our new releases. To learn more about the Church at Riverstone, visit us at thechurchatriverstone.org.